definitely jump right in then. So the good, the bad, the ugly. So for those of you who are living under a rock, thank you, Snuggles. Uh, the development team that does Final Fantasy XIV is Business Unit 3. They have been doing Final Fantasy XIV since 1.0, and then they had a branch of group that did 16. So members of the 14 crew ended up working on the 16 stuff, and it's been interesting throughout the time. It's 10-year build from 2.0 to where we are now. Some of the stuff that they've brought in, I think it's telling from at least my perspective the number of years they've had Best Community Award given to them from the Gaming Awards. So I mean, yeah. I think of all of the development teams that do MMOs, there's a lot of positive enforcement that the devs are actually listening. So I think there's some stuff that like we definitely enjoy having them listen to fix anything that's going on. But yeah, so I think some of the stuff we've talked a little bit in the Wraith of the Nine stuff and the stuff that we'd like to see in game. I think what we'll talk kind of about today is more of like the development stuff that I know Gibles has had some opinions on that we can get into.
I was going to bring up our conversation from I think yesterday and tee you up on a little bit, but I want to have a different conversation just using that as the basis. I want to use that later.
But I think we can see kind of the breadth of what they're capable of being able to do, right? With 16, given a clean slate, a new engine, the whole 9 yards. So I think, you know, that was graphically very pretty. Obviously it's a standalone game, so it doesn't compare to what you'd need for an MMO, but it at least tells us that like they're capable of, you know, these nicer qualities of life builds that we could definitely potentially see in future iterations of 14.
Yeah, well, kind of what I wanted to focus on today specifically is just like the path that they took to get to the point the game's at right now, right? Which it has had so many quality of life changes. And obviously every MMO tries to rip so much from WoW because it was like the big booming thing, and 14 has done the same thing, but has really has pushed so far away from that now you see stuff like the last why can't I think of what the WoW convention is called? BlizzCon. The last BlizzCon, yeah, they had 3 DLC announcements, and everyone is looking at that and being like, "Wow, it's Final Fantasy XIV, but in WoW." And they've changed and they've learned so much that now it feels like they're not the ones copying from other MMOs. The other MMOs are starting to copy from them, which is a really cool place to be in.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a good place to be in. I don't want them to get complacent, though. I think that's kind of the fear, right? If people start copying your MMO, then it feels like you're doing all the right stuff, and why change what you're doing right? I mean, I want there to be growth within the game. I want things to kind of continue to prosper overall. But I just want to like I want that path to continue forward, right? So we've talked about kind of the bigger gripes of like the complaints amongst the development team, which is like, oh, we're still dealing with the old spaghetti code. Well, you know, we have to move away from that conversation, right? We have to get to a point where we're no longer bound behind either this old code or like, you know, we're figuring out how to get past it. Because I mean, obviously we're making advancements in the game. We're getting quality of life builds, which is nice. You know, some of the ones that truly come to mind that, you know, we use every day but don't really think about is like the maps inside of towns when you're transporting within the town, like knowing exactly where you're going. Sometimes you don't really know, right? Other than maybe like the main cities where it's like, hey, I need to go to the Weavers Guild, so the you know, the teleport marked Weavers Guild is the one I'm going to go to, right? So it's some of those are a lot easier, but like when you get into Kugane and everything's kind of like Pier 3, well, what's Pier 3? Like, you know, what's the hotel, like, you know, all this stuff that, or the inn, or anything else that comes to mind with that kind of stuff. But having that map was kind of nice. Glamour plates was a huge addition, quality of life, something that we really would like them to expand upon. You get a bit of a taste of that, and are able to essentially function an armor set that binds to a gear set. That every time you put on that gear set, it will automatically bind that glamour to that gear set, so that you'll always have the same look. So I mean, it's stuff like that like it's little, like even just the little stuff here and there that they bring. I'm looking forward to the visual update from 7.0. And we could pull a little bit of video on that now that we have a new setup that actually runs videos properly. So we can take a little bit of that. I think that's a definite positive from what they've done in 16 to be able to kind of streamline better pixel view and whatnot. So I think that's good. Two-tone dyeing, that's huge, right? Everybody's super excited about two-tone dyeing. I mean, it's gonna be nice to be able to get more customization in this game. And then the game is constantly moving forward. So it's we think about it when it started, right? It was on PC and PS3. They did graphical updates that had to sunset the PS3 edition, but offered free PS4 upgrades. So if you had it owned for PS3, you got a free PS4 upgrade, and you could start playing it on PS4. And then, when the PS5 came out and they moved to 4K rendering, or they moved to the ability to do 4K rendering, they added a free PS5 edition for those who own PS4, so they could get them moved up. So I think that's like that's kind of things that I'm pleased to see, where a lot of games would be like, oh, we could just charge you another game fee. They're understanding that the game's already been paid for once, and the content doesn't change, so to speak, other than it's patch to patch. But then they're still being able to push that forward. But and then it makes me look at things like WoW and Guild Wars 2 or Guild Wars 1, where you're not getting those shader updates, those the graphical updates. It's relatively the same. We're still looking at polygon view, and we look at WoW, right? I mean, that game is 20 something years old. And in a lot of people's eyes, it's time for it to go.
I'm kind of on there. Like to me, I never really played WoW, so to me, it looks like I'm playing Spyro when I'm looking at it.
Legitimately, it reminds me of old. Hey, Jer. It reminds me of old Warcraft 3, like playing the RTS.
So one thing I wanted to because I want this to be kind of a feel good episode a little bit more. So on give a little more hype, because there's so much bad drama, because especially since we're in a expansion change, so everyone's just constantly drowning on about content drought. But the monumental task of even adding extra die zones, let alone the graphic update, just adding extra die zones to every piece of gear. That is not just like one line of code to every piece of gear and you can just copy paste it. That's like multiple lines of code to every piece of gear. That is new assets having to be added to every single piece of gear that they're doing that with, because you have to add different asset zones in order to now allow that piece and the different sections of that piece to be dyeable, and like the way it changes it is. And if you think about how many pieces of gear we have in this game, right, it's been going for 10 years, and every 2 to 4 months they add in like 3 armor sets, right, with like the raid, the dungeons, the 24 mans, whatever. It is so much gear, that is so much code, that is so many assets. It is an exponential equation that they tasked on. And I just wanted to like that it's great that they're adding it. It's amazing that they're adding it. And that is the easier thing than the graphical update and all of the texture rendering differences of I know that I believe they said not every zone will have the texture update, I think, right? First,
not to start. Yeah. They're gonna go back and do it. They're gonna basically do what they did with trials, or not trials.
The dungeon, the duty support.
The duty support, right?
Yeah,
that they're soloing, which is still huge, which is another huge thing, right?
Yeah, it's every rock, every set of every like, so like, I mean, like sections of grass are going to be like a tile that they recycle every now and then, right? But that each of those, there's going to be more than one tile that they use in like their pattern, right? So they're going to have to like change all of that. Every rock is going to have texture. Every the wall that you have, the tile floors in this room, like all the assets that they created previously, essentially every graphic bit that went into all these other expansions, all the graphic budget, whatever of the map design, they have to spend essentially that again in order to create a graphics update, which is huge.
Absolutely, and that's a big deal. I don't want to undersell that by any stretch, because that is being able to push out an expansion on top of everything else, and then do a big graphical update and like to get both a 2-die window, a 2-die view on each armor, and a graphical update is massive. I mean, that's a lot to undertake. It shows that they've been taking the time to kind of do the right thing. I think the testing that they're doing with cloud data centers is going to bear fruit very quickly for them. I think that they're going to realize that they can just spin up copies, and then I wouldn't be surprised if we get cross-region traffic soon, so that we can do EU and US and NA based traffic, at the very least. I know that they're withholding because of cultural differences, but I think the NA and the EU are so similar that it would make sense, and maybe Oceanic, or some of the Australian Oceanic stuff would be nice to be able to just lump those three in, so that those groups can commingle, where a lot of those social groups are the same. But I think it's also going to make a huge difference for people playing the game, right? You're going to get people who are going to move more to the servers that are best fit for their ping, and then I think the rating,
cross-region party finder and duty finder. That's something that I think is going to, especially if we can get that with the offload from these extra servers, that would 100% just remake the way you see your server 100%.
Yep. Yeah, you could stay on your server and then still be able to party find with raid like you do when you move to Aether right now, which is a topic of discussion.
I could actually build my FC instead of spending all of my time on Aether instead of in Dynamis.
Right. Yeah, I definitely think we need to do something, right? It's definitely doesn't feel good overall. But yeah, so I think it's a lot that they're bringing on. Are there some pitfalls that we deal with? Absolutely, 100%. We definitely have gripes about things that we'd like to see or that could be done better. I know Bard has some issues with the way that raid is kind of done in its fashion, that there's not really a system to really help players learn the mechanics inside the game. They're forced to leave the game. We'll get into that in a little bit. But yeah, I think overall, I think that there is a lot of passion in those groups, and yeah.
Yeah, so I kind of want to start with like definitely we can get to like what they can learn from currently and push forward, and we already know that there is things that they're going to be doing, but I kind of want to start at the beginning a little bit, like just like talk through this, because 100% a lot of the problems that they've faced have been leftovers from 1.0, right? Belts being a thing, and like, well, like I like belts, I understand, 100% agree, like it was, you don't need that extra spot, like it wasn't visually used, it wasn't it just took up an extra spot pretty much of gear, and so that's something that they fixed. It took them a long time to remove those, because it wasn't even until Shadowbringers they did that. So, but there's still other hangups and leftovers from 1.0 and what they tried to do back in the day. Like so, in A Realm Reborn, when there was like you had the elemental resistances. I don't know if you remember, you actually had for the first I think for the first 30 levels, or it was like weirdly incremental, you actually had ability points that you could assign in A Realm Reborn. I don't know if anyone remembers that. And then you could buy these stone tablets from the Grand Company to reset your ability points.
There was
So
also
you
min maxing with your race. Your race
yeah,
had stats, base stats.
yeah, race had base stats. The gods you picked had like actually effect on on some of your stats, um, as well as your as well as its ability points. And like if you wanted to be like really high end, and you wanted to swap the main class you had to do, you had to go back in and swap your main the ability scores that you put in. I think you got like 15 ability points. It was something like that, which like back in the day that was a decent amount. Um, I don't have a level 50 piece of equipment on me to like in my character in game. I don't think that I can pull up, but the so say if like you were trying to play ninja and you put those all in the decks, and then you go and you want to play black mage into a raid instead, you had to swap those into intelligence. It's a really interesting thing, and I really like the way because they already had this in the game of swapping, being able to all classes on one character, as opposed to a lot of other MMOs where you have, oh, I got 15 different characters I play because I like playing these other classes, and learning that, hey, this is a barrier, let's remove it.
Yep. So I pulled in and was trying to do a quick search for some quality of life changes, like if somebody had a big list of them. I'll read some of these. I won't go through all of them, but some of the bigger ones I think are worth mentioning, right? So somebody said, I remember when debuffs didn't show whether they could be a Sunit or not. You know how many new players take for granted that the blue bar above a debuff just means that you can assume it, and it didn't always used to be that way. Like these are like some big things. No longer having to put your chocobo away when you queue for a dungeon, because it used to cancel the moment you used to queue if you had your chocobo out or you brought it out while you were in queue. Let's see. Cooldowns upon reset wipes. So in A8S, after we died, if the paladin used hallowed ground, everybody just took 5 minutes for it to reset. That's like, these are small things, right? But they're definitely stuff that we feel. Graded glamour prisms. So we have one glamour prism to do all glamours. But it didn't used to be that way. You used to have to use the right grade of glamour prism to make things work. So that is a huge quality of life change. Changing jobs outside of sanctuaries used to mean waiting over a minute for all of your actions to cool down.
Oh, I had one right now as well that was like big. Spirit bind. If you wanted to retrieve material or extract materia from a piece of equipment, it destroyed that piece of equipment originally.
Yeah.
So the way people farmed materia, and this is one of the big ways that people used bots to farm materia, is they would just have someone in gear and it would just have like a bot black mage just like kill like lower level enemies until their gear 100% spirit bound, and then it would just swap gear and destroy that piece of equipment to a materia.
Yeah, some of the other
what I mean, like there's changes they did that they've implemented that then they realized were bad mistakes. I mean, like, so I mean, I was there as a healer in Gordian with cleric stance, and I remember so often like being like, oh like trying to damage and being like, oh shit, I need to heal this this tank, and then maybe I didn't have cleric stance on, or I was about to go back into damage, and the tank got hit with something really hard, and I was like, oh shit, I gotta do that, and I accidentally hit cleric stance, and then now, well, I have to wait 3 seconds before I can actually heal you. Diadem in that time, I feel like Diadem, I think, is the like pivotal thing to think about of them learning from their mistakes, because Diadem has been in the game, I think, 3 separate times now, in different instances. It wasn't always the gathering zone that it is now. um, it was different exploration zones. It was originally the idea of what Eureka and Baja eventually became. And even still, they're learning from that too. And like, if from Eureka to Baja, they made improvements as well.
The actual party finder. Party finder has not always been there. You used to have to stand in towns and yell when you wanted to do something. It is not a new system, but it's not an original system. Weekly tome caps. So we have people complain now that the 450 tome cap lift is too little, right? It used to be 300. It used to take you 3 weeks to get a body piece. Oh man.
And a natural progression for the game is that more tomes have come out and stuff like that. But I think it's a great thing, just in general, that they've left Poetics just there and have continued to leave it as Poetics the whole time, because Poetics was the last tomestone from Aroma Born. So like, what is it, comedy right now? Poetics was the comedy from Aroma Born, and the fact that they've left that the same is like, as expansion to expansion, has been great, because like I don't need to spend anything going into the next expansion. I at least have an extra 2,000 Poetics that I can spend right when 7.0 drops if I just didn't happen to gear someone.
Currency menu, because currency used to be part of your character menu. So all of the currency that we take in, the tomes and everything else, the crafting tomes, the gathering tomes, the purple crafting script, all that stuff, that used to be in the character menu, and now it is its own menu, which is awesome. Let's see. Market boards didn't used to have partial matching. You used to have to spell that perfectly every time in order to be able to get your search to go through.
It also didn't have as many like filter options too, because like right now you can filter for so many things. It didn't always have as many as it does today.
Right.
Another the tribes, right? The tribe quests and things like that. They learned that, oh hey, people want tribes as a way to do for gathering and for crafting. They didn't have them, right? Aroma Born has what is it, 5 tribes? Or is it 6? Every single it's not a single one. It's 5 tribes, yeah. Not a single one is a crafting one, and then they added a crafting one, and then they took them like 2 expansions, but then they had 2 more expansions, but then they added a gathering one.
Let's see. The removal of TP. That was great.
That one's a little controversial. I know some people like TP. I mean, like TP being tied to sprint, I think was the big problem. And like people still have a problem with like if you're a melee and you have an MP bar and you have no skills that use MP, right? And it kind of goes back to like the same issue of like what TP was or something like that. And I think that's something they could definitely learn from still, and go forward with that as well. Is like a skills costing a resource. Well, like your AoEs were like the thing that killed your TP back in the day, besides sprinting. But but they have fixed that with every class having a separate resource, right? They've created a resource bar. It's almost the same thing as TP. It just serves a different function. It's still a resource that you have to
each class has its own. Speaking of classes, the removal of subclassing requirements to be able to get your job stone. That is a huge one.
And that's the hangover from 1.0 and from 11.
Back in the day, in order to be able to unlock warrior, you needed what was it, 15 levels of white mage?
No. Paladin was 15 levels of white mage. Warrior was 15 levels of dragoon.
That's right. So 15 levels of dragoon and then 30 levels of marauder to be able to get warrior.
Yeah, every class had one. Bard was also a lot of them were Conjurer. You needed 15 levels of Conjurer. Pugilist was also one that you had to use quite. I think you had to. You needed 15 levels of Archer. And I think same with Dragoon. You needed 15 levels. It was either no. I think Warrior and Dragoon had like the swap. They both needed 15 levels of each other, of the Marauder and the and the Lancer.
Yep.
But hey, Paladin using Protect and Stone Skin. That's another thing. Before at every single thing you ever did, you had to stop and wait for the healer to cast Protect and Stone Skin. And while you didn't need Stone Skin 100%, you needed to wait for Protect. If you don't, so Protect used to be a 30-minute buff. It lasted even through death. It just lasted 30 minutes. No, sorry. If you died, you did have to get a rehast on you. And so like if you rezzed, the next thing you had to do when someone rezzed in combat was cast Protect. And it just reduced all damage you took by 10%. And so it was just an unnecessary thing. Everything all they did was just tune back everything, everything's damage by 10% and then removed the skill. And it was effectively the same, but with a less of a step. Of having to cast Protect right before combat.
Yep.
And Stone Skin was essentially worked kind of like Blackest Night, where it was essentially a shield that would eat, I think it was like 20% of your max HP, and then it could not be cast in combat. So you started combat with Stone Skin, and then everyone just had that extra shield going into the beginning of the fight. Both those things are gone now. Because there was just extra steps that didn't need to be there, and they could have just tuned the fights as if those things were always there.